Hey there, this is Yaro Welcome to a solo episode of my podcast. And I have to announce first, perhaps sadly, that I have completed the Vested Capital podcast series. I'm calling it that now. It originally was the reboot of my podcast, Vested Capital. As you can see, if you're watching in the video, here's my little podcast icon. Was sitting here on my camera, on my microphone boom. So if you listen to Vested Capital episode number 0, which is 37 episodes ago in the Vested Capital series, well, technically 38, you'll hear me do an overview of my business background. Totally recommend you listen to episode 0 if you're new to me, who I am, just what I've done as an entrepreneur. So I'm not going to repeat that. It's a great intro to me. However, Vested Capital as a reboot, it was a reboot of the Yaro podcast. And I've decided to go back to the Yaro podcast for several reasons. One of the reasons was by changing the name and the sort of direction of the show to Vested Capital, I started getting a lot of people approaching me that were more in financial world. So what I mean by that is I was getting basically people coming to me who wanted to be a guest on my show, and they were doing things with maybe cryptocurrency or stock trading, finance, and that was fine. But I also obviously want to interview entrepreneurs from all kinds of walks of life, and that's what I did. I tried to find real estate investors, online entrepreneurs, whether they're doing SaaS or selling information products, e-commerce. Anyone with an interesting story was kind of my goal with Vested Capital. But I kind of lost a bit of momentum around that. If you're looking at my feed, I think the last episode was over 6 months ago. That's terrible. And if you followed this show for a long time, it's always been a bit sporadic. In fact, the first episode was all the way back in 2006, I believe, if you go back to the original Entrepreneur's Journey podcast. So I'm not known for consistency. I tend to do this show because I enjoy it. It's had so many different versions. It at one point was just me exploring what audio blogging was. That's before the term podcast kind of took off. That was the sort of 2006, 2007 era. Then it sort of became more mainstream and has been going through revolutions as podcasting certainly becomes very well and truly mainstream now. For my show, it was an exploration of audio, and then it became a way to meet other entrepreneurs, share their stories with you, my listeners. And then it became very much a tool to interview people who were doing things related to what I taught at the time. So this is around 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. I interviewed a lot of people selling information products. And if you go back to the very sort of early episodes of the Entrepreneur's Journey podcast and the Yaro podcast, you'll get a lot of that. People selling information products on all kinds of topics, from cosmetic chemistry to speed reading to sports betting, curing acne, lots of really interesting entrepreneur stories. But that related to my business at the time, which was really teaching. I had a course, Blog Mastermind. I have a membership site, the Laptop Lifestyle Academy. It was all kind of related to that business. And then for my reboot, which is really the last, I guess, 2 or 3 years with Vested Capital, I just wanted to expand the scope of the show. And I did, and it was fun. I had some interesting guests. I even had a couple of billionaire guests, or people who had started billionaire companies. You can find them in the archives, the last 37 episodes. In fact, you can dive back into the history of all of those. But I did lose momentum. And it's primarily because my energy has been going to my current projects and my new projects, really. So my main business, inboxdone.com, as well as a couple of other projects I'm working on, which will be launching very soon. And with my energy going there, I really didn't feel there was a direction for me to continue doing the podcast. And I've been thinking about this a lot behind the scenes as I listen to other people's podcasts. I love this medium. Obviously, YouTube is huge now. I am recording this on video. I am going to release it on YouTube. I'm using Riverside so I can get high quality video, high quality audio, and share it both as an audio podcast feed. It'll be on iTunes, it'll be on Spotify, it'll be on YouTube, it's going to be everywhere. I'm not going to put this in sort of high video production. I will probably do a few episodes of maybe YouTube videos, not so much podcasts that are more high production, but for the podcasts, they're going to be me talking. So I want to start by just basically giving you that overview and saying that unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, Vested Capital is being retired, and I'm returning to the Yaro podcast. Going to switch the cover art over, really easy for me to do. And it's not going to be a big change, except for one thing. I'm planning on making this a little bit more featuring me as a solo podcaster, and in particular around one idea: transparency. So I love doing interviews, and when there's a great guest and it aligns well with what I'm doing, I will definitely do an interview and release it to you. But it is easier. There's less resistance for me just to switch on the camera, switch on the microphone, and do a talk to you. And I say transparency because there's a lot going on behind the scenes with the different projects I'm working on. I'm learning a lot. Obviously, we're in a crazy time now with AI booming, all these different businesses. Obviously, I've got a successful business. I've got two new businesses that I'd love to talk more about with you. I'm learning about new ways to invest my money and keep my money safe and grow my income. I'm still interested in property investment, but I'm kind of expanding and looking at that as a way to explore my digital nomad lifestyle. So maybe buying property overseas, all these ideas, all these things I'm learning. And I'd like to be more transparent with you just to share, because it's a great way for me to kind of go back to my origins. My blog and this podcast, to a lesser degree, in the very, very early days, was a place for me to be completely open and transparent with you about what was working, what was not working. And that was a lot about my projects, but also the people I interviewed. Obviously, my goal was to hear their story, their entrepreneur journey, their business background. And I loved to really dig deep and get them to be transparent about their numbers, about what marketing methods were working. How did they come up with the idea for their product or their service? How did they reach a certain financial milestone? What do they do with their money once they have it? All of these things were interesting to me, so I asked them those questions. I also got to explain those things in my own life to you as a kind of an ongoing background story with the Entrepreneur's Journey blog. If for my long-term listeners and readers, you'll know what I'm referring to, then that was the name of my blog back in the day. And I did exactly what that title explains. It was an entrepreneur's journey, and I was writing articles to explain an experiment I did to reach an audience for my website back then. So I had a card game business, I had an essay editing agency, I had all kinds of different websites I was sort of buying and selling, forums, communities, things like that. Then I got into blogging, information marketing, selling courses, selling membership sites, selling ebooks. I wrote all about that. I started teaching sales funnels, email marketing, product launches, all that information, digital marketing. And then, a bit of mindset, productivity. More recently, kind of dipping into agency advice, because that's actually, what I've been focusing on for the last sort of 5-6 years as I grow another agency. So I got a lot there to share in my recent history that I really haven't been sharing, because to be honest, I haven't had time or maybe energy or the motivation to tell stories behind the scenes, because I've just been focusing on the actual running and the growing of those businesses, or one in particular, Inbox Done. And my energy went there. So my content creation energy went there. The hours in the day that I would spend working would go there. So I didn't have as much of a reason to write about like the meta, the behind the scenes of the business growth. Part of me wanted to. I enjoy blogging about business, and sharing my own stories is something I really enjoy. And I know it's beneficial. Being transparent is kind of like core to my experience of being an online profile personality. Nowadays, you call it an influencer. I'm not a big fan of that term, but back when I started blogging, that's what I was doing, as you would label it today. I was being a content creator, an influencer, not with the intention of necessarily growing a personal brand, but it happened because I was transparent and I enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it. So I'm not going to call this a reboot or a relaunch. I'm just going to drop episodes when I have time and things to share with you, because it's just me, because I can do this so easily, just jumping in front of the camera. I'm going to share behind the scenes what's going on. In fact, I have the next episode coming out right after this. This is going to be a short, quick introduction just to retire the Vested Capital brand and reboot, or go back to the Yaro podcast. But I have an episode coming up next. It's going to be all about how I use content, or we use content, to grow my agency into a 7-figure business, specifically 5 tactics that worked at different phases. So it's a 5-year journey so far. In fact, a little bit more than that. But over those 5 years, how we grew the business from the start to the point now where it's a 7-figure agency. That's a huge milestone. Anytime you get a 7-figure business, I think is worth celebrating. It's very rare, very difficult, and I'm excited that I can actually say that now. I've got permission from my co-founder to announce that publicly can say that, because we've been very bit more guarded with certain things behind the scenes, and I haven't really been able to talk numbers to you, and I still can't really talk numbers to you other than say we are a 7-figure ARR business. So I'm going to be sharing 5 tactics. There's actually a companion blog post on Yaro.blog. You can go read that right now. I also reshared that content on Indie Hackers. If you're an indiehackers.com reader, you can find it there in the inbox done chronicle, the sort of journal I'm keeping there of the progress of that business. But Yaro.blog certainly will have this podcast and that article as well available. So again, the reason why I'm retiring Vested Capital is not because I don't love interviewing people, not because I don't love all the topics around money, investment, growing your capital. That was the theme, the subject of that podcast. But I do want to be able to do more solo episodes. I do want to focus on transparency with what I'm learning, what I'm doing. And that just doesn't work with the Vested Capital brand. Plus, I actually want to shut that brand down because as I said before, I'm attracting a lot of interest from guests that I just don't want to feature as much as I'm getting. Too many people in the worlds of finance and investing on a purely stock market or cryptocurrency kind of basis. And not that those aren't interesting topics, it's just not something I want to be talking about as an interviewer on a podcast anymore. So goodbye, Vested Capital. All the archives are there, though. They're not going away. You'll find the Vested Capital podcast art. You can see the episodes are numbered, so there's 0 to 37. Great guest. You can learn a lot. And if you go before 0, in fact, there's another, 50 plus episodes I still have on this feed. I think there's about 87. This will be the 88th. So lots of great interviews, a couple of solo episodes in there as well if you want to get the background. But we're moving forward. So we're going to be transparent, talking about my projects, starting with inboxdone.com, now a 7-figure agency. And we're going to talk about growth on the next episode coming up very soon. So that's it, little preview. Looking forward to doing this episode with you coming up next. So I'm going to end it there. If you want to subscribe, head to yaro.blog or just look for the Yaro, Y-A-R-O podcast in whatever podcast tool, app you use on your phone, on your desktop, in your car, wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Just look for my name, Yaro Starak, and the podcast is Back to the Yaro Podcast. Okay, I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for listening or watching. I'll see you on YouTube as well. My name is Yaro. Bye-bye.